Okay guys, then we get into chapter 5, tendering procedures, Cook and Williams. This is a very nice and a very important chapter. You will see I included quite a lot of slides in this one. Um, and just to let you guys know, the distance guys actually wrote a test last week, the first formal test on chapters 3 and 10. Um, so they didn't write anything about chapter 5, but chapter 5 we quickly discussed in class. Um, but chapter 5 is a very important chapter for me because we've got the procedures. This is now becoming a little bit more interesting because it's becoming practical on whenever you guys step into a construction firm, how you're gonna approach the whole process. Okay, so basically starting with the introduction is the first objective is to find a job. Obviously, if you don't have a project, you um, can't earn money, you can't apply everything that you've learned through your studies and your experience. So similarly, as you guys are looking for a site to actually base your task on, see that as your procurement phase in your task. So first you have to find a job. Then pre-tender planning is done under the following headings. Establish the contract leads, pre-tender qualification, the tender process, traditional competitive tendering. Okay, so basically what it says is you have certain things that you need to do. Is you need to network, you need to um, get the papers where the adverts are of the tendering procedures. You need to go onto Public Works website and etc. So you have to look for work. I always say looking for work is an active job. If you don't have any work, it will take up all of your time. You can't sit back and wait for something to happen. Um, and once you've got a few jobs going, you can actually get into a, a system where you don't actually tender for jobs very often, or look for jobs. Your clients will actually ask, if you're doing very good work, they will ask you or let you know about tenders going out. So you will actually um, get more work as you go along. Okay, then establishing contract leads. Okay, this is very theoretical. Is marketing approach is needed. Tendering cost, it costs money to tender. We had the hawker stalls now in Portobello. I think one of those tender documents cost about 7,000 rand just to get a document. Then you haven't put in a tender and your time and effort into that yet. So you have to really be realistic on what type of projects you're going for. Then risk and profit potential have to be evaluated. For instance, now that Orchestals, that's a building project. If you're a civil contractor and you have too much work anyway, then you consider, is it maybe too high risk to actually spend time on that one? Let's rather wait for another big civil project, which suits us a little bit better. And also, for instance, I think something that I can think of working in rural communities, it does have a bit of a risk of the community involvement and so on. Some people like it, but you have to build in a bit of your rates will be different because you're going to spend a lot of time in meetings with the community and so forth. Or if you have a very high rise building, your insurance will be higher. Do I want to take that risk or not? But then project criteria have to be set. Some examples are project type. Like I said, we're only going for this type of projects. We're going only for this type or this size projects. Contractual arrangements. We're only going to look at, say, JVCC contracts or only NEC contracts. The form of contract and the terms, okay, that's related to that. And then the location. We're only going to tender in 100 kilometers away from Bloemfontein, for instance, or now we'll take on work in Kuruman or in Joburg or wherever. Doesn't matter. Okay, like I said, it takes time and effort. Pre-tender qualifications. Okay, this guys, there has to be very specific criteria that you set for yourself. And then you have general criteria like the company details, the completed project record, technical expertise, plant. When you guys start doing tenders, you will see the standard forms that the guys ask for. Your SARS re, registration, your CIDB registration, your BE registration, etc. So you have to have those things in place. If you're doing government jobs, you have to have a CIDB grading, you have to be BE registered, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Competence, past experience is very important. Some guys, well, I usually write it into the tender documents. You have to have reference letters or completion certificates of previous work that you have done. So it can be difficult to build up that references. Okay, then obviously what resources you're going to use, which people, what their qualifications are, your company organization and structure, current projects that you're busy with, do you have capacity to do that, details of insurance, etc. Okay, and then I just added BE here, which I already spoke about, just in the South African context. Then Construction Industry Development Board. Okay, the CIDB again gives us nice tables or guidelines on how to evaluate tenders. So we have price and preference, and then we've got functionality, price and preference. This is just an example to show you guys that sometimes we bring in functionality. If you think about health and safety, that example that I had the previous slide is on certain projects you may ask the people to have a pre-qualification for their previous health and safety references. For instance, their health and safety reps have to give you a good reference. You have to have a green star rating, that type of thing. You have to have at least done a building of 3 stories and higher before. So you have that pre-qualification items that you can build in. So just take note of that might be required in practice. Okay, then getting back to Cook and Williams, is estimating involves making inquiries to supply cost and materials. So what we've looked at now is your pre-qualifications, the basics that you have to have. But now we're looking at the actual pricing of your submission that you're going to do, your estimation of the project. You first have to make inquiry, supplies, cost, materials, ask for specialist quotations from subcontractors, labor costs, pricing items in the BOQ. It includes also planning timescales of the projects. This is very important for your P's and G's. Pricing the cost of running a project on site, also P's and G's, and then production, producing a summary of the tender for the tender directors. So if you're in a large company, you will prepare a report to your directors, and then the directors will evaluate that report, and that will actually be submitted, and they will sign it off. Okay, then just looking at the medium-sized company, small medium-sized companies, you have your managing director here, and then your estimator here on this side, and your contractor, contracts director, and your commercial manager's office. So you can see there's a split between the professions, and usually your estimators get the information from from these guys that they use for the tender reports and estimating, and then they provide it to the manager, who actually signs off and say yes, you can go on. So once you actually awarded the project, then your contracts director and your commercial guys actually get involved, taking it further. Large companies, you will see, okay, so you've got a little bit more items. So you've got your estimating, your contracts, your planning, your administration on this side. So you have your planning, chief planning engineer, you have your tender projects here, and a contracts planner. So these are the guys that actually say, yes, we're going to go for these type of projects. If they can see, they build up a database from, okay, these were the tenders that we were successful on, this is what we did, and then they become the tender specialists. And then you've got the estimating office, where you have the estimators, who usually advises your planning and your tender planners on costs, etc. Then you've got your contracts manager, who actually implements the work. And then your administration, your commercial manager, and clerical staff. These are the guys that assist with on-site management and that type of things. Okay, then I'm not going to go through this, but this is very important. Principal director's tendering responsibilities. You have the managing director. He's responsible for decision to tender. Yes, we're going to tender. He is also he organizes the bid, the tender adjudication risk assessment. He's involved in analysis of the tender performance. Okay, and then the estimating guys. After the manager said yes, we're going to tender for this, then the estimating guys also has a look whether they're going to go for this tender or not. Then we've got this whole process that's laid out quite nicely. And then the contract manager, he actually looks at the contract portion of the contract and says yes, we're going to tender, and then the whole process starts again. Okay. Okay, so you've got your tender launch meeting, and then you've got your site visit, and your design development, and your client brief, and your draft BOQ that's prepared, and then you build up an estimate, and then you've got your pre-program for your P's and G's, and then you will see estimating summary, which is prepared, which is presented to your client, and then you've got your tender settlement, and then your final preparation for your tender submission. So looking at your normal one, figure 5.3, just have a look at that sequence. It's slightly different. We here at the top section is you've got your site visit still. You've got most of the same items on this side, but you've got your consulting team who's advising the client on it. Okay, then just going through the steps for the competitive tenders. And the traditional method is it's divided into the following stages. So this is very important for me. You guys have to know and explain these steps whenever you're doing a tender. So you're going to first take the decision to tender. You have your pre-tender arrangements, your site visits. Don't neglect your site visit. This is most of the times where you get your competitive edge on your other competitors that didn't visit the site. Items that you will look at, for instance, is there suppliers in the vicinity or not? Just in case, is there any municipal connections there? That type of thing. Then inquiries to subcontractors and suppliers. Build up your rate and estimate, your pre-tender method statement, preparation of pre-tender program, build up of contract preliminaries, management adjudication estimate, and then your analysis of tender performance. Okay, so this is very important, although I think in the book they embroidered a little bit on this, but this is a stage gate. Your director, you present the whole tender to your director, and he says yes, we can proceed or not. So this is basically this step that's listed here. Again, here's the traditional method of procurement, is all those steps which I just spoke about listed here on the left, and then you can see how the sequencing relates to each other. I'll spend a little bit of time on this once we actually get into the tutorials and the practical side of the subject. Okay, then we've got another thing is the decision to tender. This you guys should also know, but this is more supplementary. Is the price should be influenced by the risk of the market. Circumstances may change and should be evaluated during the adjudication stage. The following checklist can be used: tendering policies, working capital, availability of resources, all those items that I basically spoke of earlier. Yeah, I think so. Why I say that is it's logical. These are the examples that you're going to provide um, to me. So that slide that I spoke of, your procedure. This is when you're taking a decision whether to tender or not. Then you can discuss that item with this. So hierdie is basies aanvullend. Hierdie is jou 'n bietjie vleis wat jy kan bou van aan gaan ons tender, gaan ons nie tender nie. Okay. Okay, then just the arrangements. So we looked at the qualifications, now we're looking at the arrangements. The main responsibility lies with the estimator surveyor together with the contract manager to get the tender going. The estimator produces tasks include the following. You receive the document, you register a number, circulate the inquiry number, set up decision to tender meeting. Okay, so you organize a meeting with everyone involved that's going to assist you. And then you take a decision in that meeting, are we going to go on with this tender or not? Distribution of the documentation, arranging review meeting. Okay, once we've done the estimation, you have a review meeting to say, yes, are we still going on or not? Arranging adjudication meeting and submitting the final bid. Okay, so this is now at the directives level, this last one. Okay, then just looking in depth at some of the items that we looked at is the site visit report. This is one which is usually neglected, as most contracts have a disclaimer indicating that the contractor would have investigated the site beforehand. So please be mindful of that. The following factors influence the tender price: access to site works, access restrictions, site topography, topography, there we go. And then waste disposal sites, site security, adjacent buildings and services, soil conditions, and other risks. It's amazing how much you pick up by just going to site, where you won't notice it otherwise. For instance, a simple thing, I've already given some examples, but for instance, soil conditions, access to site, and all those items that I gave you guys. You can have a look on page 90. There's a nice performer, a nice checklist of items that you need to look at. So I only listed the headings. Please go through the actual content underneath each of those headings. It's belangrik, yeah. It's also for discussion. When you guys, I may ask, what's the importance of visiting a site before you submit your tender? And all of that will assist you to actually discuss a site visit. Okay. Then tender inquiries to subcontractors and suppliers. You've got subcontractors. The estimator takes out the BOQ and sends it to the relevant guys. For instance, you will take out your electrical section and you will send it to your electrical guys. You will take out your metalwork, your aluminium windows and so on, and you will send it to a supplier who will help you with those quotations, etc., etc. He should be careful to know what each subcontractor includes in his price to prevent duplication. So that's very important. Like for instance, if you think about electrical installations, the electrical contractor will not necessarily do the excavations and the backfilling in trenches for his cable. So the civil contractor might have to assist him with that. So whenever you get prices back from an electrical guy, it doesn't necessarily include the excavations, backfill, and those type of things. Whereas if you send it to a civil contractor, subcontractor who's going to assist you with the water pipe work and so on, they might include that. So you don't have to price for that again. Okay. But the main thing is you communicate with your suppliers and make sure what it includes, what it doesn't include, and so forth. Items are usually split into trades. Yes. Subletting should also be kept in mind. For instance, your subcontractors may sublet some certain work to other guys. Another good example, which I encounter quite often, is your electrical guys have in their bills of quantities usually a contingency at the end, and then in the main bill we have a contingency as well. So just have a look. That is sometimes a bit of, if you clarify it with your contract, the guys that's putting out the tenders, you can actually get a bit of a competitive edge there, because then you don't have to put in contingencies twice. Okay. Suppliers, the contractors may conduct certain items themselves or thus need material rates. Okay, that's straightforward. Then material is supplied in different units than is included in a BOQ and should be converted. That's now, for instance, if you think about steel work, for instance, your sections is usually either 3 meter long, or you have your pipes, water pipes, which is usually 6 meters in length. So whenever you're calculating, the BOQ will just give you the total length, but you have to calculate the wastage and all that type of thing. Okay. Build up the estimate. Okay, then the next step is estimating can involve more than one estimator planners. The following process is involved: build up all rates for labor, pricing the bill sections, analyze the quotations, build up the contract preliminaries, preparation of tender summary, attending the tender adjudication meeting. Okay, so that's very straightforward. That's just the steps. Do you guys have questions on that? I think that's fairly straightforward. Okay, then build up of your estimate. This is very important for me. You're gonna definitely use this in your tasks, and you will be tested on this. If it's not in informal assessments, you will be assessed on this in your tests, etc. You must be able to build up, explain how rates are built up using your labor, your material, and your plant. Okay, and then I'm not going to go through the processes listed on this side. I think you guys can read through that, which is fairly straightforward, but you must be able to discuss this process. You did this in PKM last year as well, but this is now just what type of questions I will ask is the process of building up a specific rate, for instance, and in your task you will have to use this process to build up your rates. Okay, then pre-tender method statements. This I'm just going to touch on the method statements now, because we've got a whole chapter that only deals with method statements. But this is probably one of the most important things for this year. I encounter contractors that don't even know what a method statement is. But it's probably one of your biggest or most important items that you need to know as a construction manager and a construction project manager, because you have to be able to ask for method statements, and you have to be able to draft them as well. But a method statement, all that it says basically is, I understand how the work is done, and this is how I'm going to do it. It outlines the sequence and method of construction. Pre-tender program is compiled from this, so you get your statement before you get your program. Your program is a form of a method statement. It sequences all your items that you're going to do, but you can't really know what is behind each item without a method statement. Then you've got your preliminaries are calculated from this program. Then your civil works put more emphasis on the method statement, because measurements are left as less details than in the building contracts. So what you guys been learning together with the QS is basically the bill of quantities already assists you in laying out the program. Whereas in your civil contracts, where you measure on the SAN system, um, your bill items is it's much there's less description in there, so you have to fill the gaps. So whenever you're doing a pricing, I've seen items in a engineering contract bill of quantities where they measured a building as one item. This is build this size building, this high with this type of roof, and there you go. You have to measure the whole thing and build it. So you have to compile a whole method statement and actually measure it. So a lot of work is done by the contractor to actually get to a rate. It's almost like a design and build type of thing that you need to submit. So please note that the bills of quantities are a relative or relatively sequenced already. Then preparation of a pre-tender program. The pre-tender program highlights risks. It allows the contractor to provide his preliminaries. The main question is, can it be done within that period? That's always the question. If the contractor sees it can't, qualify it in your tender, that it will take longer than is foreseen in the tender documents, and allow for this price through insurance and additional P's and G's. Okay, so this is a bit of a risk sometimes, because this will in some instances cause you to not to win the tender, but it's a high risk because some of the guys don't even consider that, and then they get appointed and then they can't deliver the project and they go into penalties, etc. So you have to be realistic when you do your tender evaluation. The program is usually a tender requirement. So whenever you submit your tender, you have to submit a program with that as well. Finally, a bar chart is usually the best way to show the program visually. Okay, then just running through the build-up of contractual preliminaries. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this on the next session, your preliminaries. This is where you get your competitive edge actually as a contractor, and where your method statements and your program comes into its own. Preliminaries allows the items that cannot be reasonably priced in the measurement items. For instance, your cranes, your insurances, and that type of thing. They usually consist of time, fixed or value-based items. The preliminary checklist may comprise the following: the employee's requirements, contract management and site staffing, site accommodation cost, attendance and subcontractors, facilities and services, temporary works, mechanical plant, non-mechanical plant. Okay, then just management adjudication of the estimate. The estimator presents the tender document to the director. Then the director will ask a couple of questions. Is this estimate accurate? Have the items been priced sensibly? And are subcontractor prices achievable? Is the pre-tender program realistic? And then he will either then agree with the price or increase or reduce the price. And then a 2-envelope system may be required by the client, one for quality and one for cost. Okay, so the main thing is this is just the final step before you actually submit your tender. I remember my first job was actually as a contractor to dissect the bills of quantities, make copies, scan them. Well, at that stage, I don't think scanning only started out, but what we did is we faxed it to suppliers, and they would price it, send it back, and then I would write in the prices that I think it should be, and then the director actually went through it and amended the prices as he thought best. Okay. Okay, then analysis of the tender performance. There are two schools. This is now basically, some people say, no, we're wasting our time to actually go and look why we won the tender and why some didn't. And then we've got the other school, let's try and learn from our proposal, try and submit a more accurate and competitive and relevant tender. So I think it's also up for, you will only really understand this when you guys get experience. I'm a big believer of rather submitting quality than submit and less of it than going for quantity and seeing what pops out afterwards. The risk is just too high to actually submit tenders which is not up to standard. So yeah, that's basically it.